Morning light spilled across the Montana high country in sheets of pale gold, touching the shoulders of mountains that had witnessed 1,000 stories end badly. The town of Redemption Creek sat in a valley where the sage grew thick and the wind carried the scent of pine and something darker, desperation maybe, or fate, coming down the line like a locomotive with failed brakes. Sarah Catherine Hartwell stepped off the westbound stage with nothing but a carpet bag, a letter creased from 100 readings, and a heart full of carefully managed hope. Her wedding dress, wrapped in muslin, lay folded at the bottom of her bag. Sunlight caught the auburn in her hair as she steadied herself against the stage door, her dove-gray traveling dress dusted with 3 days of trail dirt. She'd never seen sky this big. Virginia had trees that made you feel held. This country made you feel exposed. "Miss Hartwell?" A boy no more than 14 approached, hat in hand. "Mr. Brennan sends his apologies, ma'am. He's tending to business at the credit union but says to meet him there directly. I'm to carry your bag." Sarah's fingers tightened on the carpet bag's handle. She'd exchanged 17 letters with Thomas Brennan over 8 months. His words had been kind, his prospects promising, assistant manager at the only bank for 100 miles, a steady man in an unsteady world. She'd memorized the photograph he'd sent. Serious eyes, a good jaw, the kind of face that spoke of reliability. "Thank you," she said, releasing the bag. "I can find my own way." The boy pointed down the rutted main street. "Can't miss it, ma'am." "Only brick building in town." Her boots echoed on the wooden boardwalk as she walked. Around her, Redemption Creek was waking like a beast shaking off sleep. A blacksmith's hammer rang out. Somewhere, a woman sang while hanging laundry. The morning smelled of coffee and horse and possibility. She didn't see the 5 riders coming in from the north. They called him the Garnet Kid, though he'd left 30 behind 2 winters back. Ezra Kane sat his blood bay horse like a man who'd been born in the saddle, which wasn't far from truth. His coat was the color of charcoal, his hat pulled low against the climbing sun. Behind him rode 4 men with hard eyes and harder histories. "Bank opens at 8, said Merle, spitting tobacco into the dust. "Brennan's always first one in." Ezra's jaw tightened. He'd ridden with Thomas Brennan once, back when they were both young and stupid enough to think robbing trains was romantic. That was before Ezra took a bullet in the shoulder and got left behind. Before his brother died in a territorial prison while Brennan walked away clean. Testimony traded for freedom. "We go in quiet," Ezra said, his voice like gravel under a wagon wheel. "Customers stay calm. Nobody gets hurt. We're here for the federal payroll. Nothing else." But even as he said it, some instinct whispered that quiet wasn't in the cards today. The morning felt wrong, too still, too bright, like the moment before lightning strikes. Sarah reached the credit union just as the clock tower struck 8. The brick building stood solid and square, its windows reflecting back the mountains. She smoothed her skirts, touched her hair, felt her heart hammer against her ribs like a wild thing testing its cage. This was it, the beginning of her new life. She pushed open the heavy door. The interior was all dark wood and serious business. A single clerk stood behind the counter, sorting papers. In the back office, she could see a man's silhouette through frosted glass. Thomas, she thought, and felt something flutter in her chest that might have been joy or terror or both. The clerk looked up. "Help you, miss?" "I'm here to see Mr. Brennan. Sarah Catherine Hartwell. He's expecting—" The door exploded inward behind her. 5 men poured into the bank like a flash flood through a canyon. The lead rider, dark coat, darker eyes, had a revolver in each hand, though neither was aimed at anything yet. Just a promise hanging in the air. "Everybody stays calm. Everybody lives," he said, his voice carrying an authority that made disobedience seem foolish. "This is just business." Sarah's breath caught. She'd read about such things in the penny dreadfuls, but those were stories. This was real. The smell of gun oil and sweat, the terrible weight of those revolvers, the way her legs had gone liquid beneath her. The office door opened. Thomas Brennan stepped out, and Sarah watched something transform in his face when he saw the man in the dark coat. Not fear, recognition, and something else. Guilt, maybe, or old debts coming due. "Ezra," Thomas breathed. The gunman's eyes narrowed. "Been a while, Tommy." Then his gaze shifted to Sarah, still frozen just inside the door, and something flickered across his face. Concern, or maybe regret, before his expression hardened again into something unreadable. "Everybody on the floor," he said quietly. "Now." And Sarah Catherine Hartwell, who'd come west looking for a new beginning, found herself lying on the cold boards of a frontier bank while her future unraveled like a rope with a fray in it, and outside the window, the morning light turned the color of old gunmetal. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled down from the mountains like the voice of God, passing judgment on all their choices. Time moved different with a gun in the room. Sarah pressed her cheek against the floorboards, tasting dust and fear. Through the legs of chairs and the shadows under counters, she could see the other customers. A rancher, a widow in black, the clerk with his ink-stained fingers, all frozen in positions of prayer or surrender. "The federal payroll," Ezra said to Thomas. His revolvers hadn't wavered. "Back office, now!" But Thomas didn't move. His hands were raised, his face pale in the morning light streaming through the windows. "They'll hang you for this, Ezra. It's not too late to ride out." "Wasn't too late when you testified against my brother either." Ezra's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of years. "But you did it anyway. Bought yourself freedom with his life." Sarah's heart hammered. This wasn't just a robbery. This was something older, something personal. She watched Thomas's face crumble, watched him age 10 years in 10 seconds. "I had no choice," Thomas whispered. "They would have hanged me." They hanged Marcus instead. Ezra's finger tightened on the trigger, just slightly. Your redemption cost him everything. The moment stretched like hot glass. Sarah found herself unable to look away from Ezra's face, the pain there, the fury, but also something she recognized. Loss. The kind that carved you hollow and filled the space with stones. Outside, horses screamed. "Riders coming!" shouted Merle from his position by the window. "Posse! Maybe a dozen!" Everything happened at once. Thomas lunged for a rifle under the counter. One of Ezra's men fired, the shot deafening in the enclosed space. The window exploded inward. Sarah screamed, covering her head as glass rained down like broken stars. Then strong hands grabbed her arms, hauling her upright. Ezra. His face was inches from hers, and she could see everything in his eyes: desperation, calculation, and something that might have been apology. "You're coming with us," he said. "No." She tried to pull free, but his grip was iron. "I'm sorry." And the terrible thing was, he sounded like he meant it. "But you're the only reason they won't shoot us in the street." He pulled her toward the back door as gunfire erupted from the posse outside. His men laid down covering fire. Thomas was shouting something, but the words were lost in the chaos. Sarah's mind spun. This wasn't how her story was supposed to go. She was supposed to be married by sunset, settled into a new life. Safe. But safety was a lie the frontier told to people soft enough to believe it. They rode hard into the high country. Sarah sat in front of Ezra on his blood-bay horse, his arm locked around her waist, keeping her steady as they climbed trails only mountain goats should attempt. Behind them, the posse followed, but the gap was widening. These men knew the country like wolves knew hunting grounds. "I'm sorry," Ezra said again, quieter this time, meant only for her. "When we're clear, I'll let you go. You have my word." Sarah's fear had crystallized into something sharper: anger. "Your word? You're an outlaw and a kidnapper. What's your word worth?" He was quiet for a long moment. The horse picked its way up a narrow switchback, and below them, Redemption Creek was a toy town in a valley of impossible green. "My brother kept his word," Ezra said finally. "Right up until the moment they hanged him. So did I until the man I trusted most traded his life for convenience." He paused. "Some things break a person, Miss Hartwell, but some things are all you've got left to hold on to." She heard the rawness in his voice, the wound that had never healed. And despite everything, the fear, the ruined plans, the absolute insanity of her situation, she found herself seeing him differently. Not as a villain from a storybook, but as a man shaped by losses she couldn't imagine. "Thomas Brennan is a good man," she said, but even as she spoke, doubt crept in. She'd never met Thomas, only his letters, only his carefully constructed image. "Thomas Brennan is a survivor," Ezra replied. "That's not the same thing." They stopped at a line shack deep in the timber, where the light came down green and gold through the pine canopy. Ezra's men wanted to push further, but the horses were blown and the posse had lost their trail. Ezra helped Sarah down from the horse. Her legs nearly buckled, but she forced herself to stand straight, to meet his eyes without flinching. "There's jerky and coffee inside," he said. "I'll post watch. We'll move again at dark." "And then what?" Sarah demanded. "You release me in the middle of nowhere? I walk back alone?" "I'll take you close enough to find your way." "Why take me at all?" The question exploded out of her. "You could have just run." Ezra looked at her, really looked, and she saw the exhaustion there. "Because I'm not what the stories say. I don't kill innocents. I don't leave bodies in my wake. All I wanted was what Thomas owed my brother, justice or money enough to make up for it. But now—" He shook his head. "Now I'm a kidnapper too. One more thing I never meant to be." Something in his voice made Sarah's anger falter. "What happened to your brother?" "He got caught in Crossfire. Wrong place, wrong time, but Thomas testified he was the ringleader to save his own neck. Marcus swung 3 weeks later." Ezra's jaw worked. He was 20 years old. The wind moved through the pines, whispering secrets the mountains knew. "I came west to start over," Sarah said quietly. "To become someone new, someone brave enough to take chances." She looked at Ezra. "Maybe we're not so different. Maybe we're all just trying to outrun what broke us." The posse found them at sunset. Not through tracking, through betrayal. One of Ezra's men had sent word, hoping for leniency. The first shot came as Ezra was saddling his horse, and Sarah watched him stagger, watched the blood bloom across his shoulder like a dark flower. "Go!" he shouted at his men. "Take the horses and go!" But Sarah didn't run. She'd spent her whole life being careful, being proper, letting fear make her choices. Not anymore. She grabbed Ezra's arm, dragging him toward the shack. He was heavy, stumbling, but she was stronger than she looked. Inside, she barred the door and pressed her shawl against his wound, while bullets thudded into the walls like deadly percussion. "What are you doing?" Ezra gasped. "You should be out there telling them you're safe." "Shut up," Sarah said, surprising herself. "You're going to bleed out if I don't stop this." His laugh was bitter and bright. "Didn't figure you for a fool." "I'm not," she said, meeting his eyes. "But I'm done pretending I'm something I'm not. Done with safe choices and careful plans. You took me hostage, but you also kept your word. And that man I came here to marry, he traded another man's life for his own. So forgive me if I'm reconsidering my options." Outside, Thomas's voice rang out. "Sarah, if you can hear me, just walk out. He can't hurt you anymore." Ezra looked at her, something like wonder in his face despite the pain. "You're going to get yourself killed for a man you don't even know." "Maybe." Sarah's hands were steady on his wound now, steady and sure. "Or maybe I'm finally living the story I was meant to." The standoff lasted until moonrise. In the end, it was Sarah who walked out, hands raised, voice clear. She told the posse about the wound, about the blood loss, about a man who'd kept his word even when he didn't have to. She told them about Thomas's testimony, about a brother who died for another man's sins. "He's done," she said. "No more running. But he gets a trial, a fair one. That's all I'm asking." The posse parted, and Thomas stepped forward. In the moonlight, Sarah could see him clearly for the first time, still handsome, still proper. But there was something missing behind his eyes, something that mattered. "Sarah," he began, "I'm so sorry you got caught up in this." "Are you sorry you lied?" she asked. "About what you did?" He looked away. "I did what I had to survive." So did he. Sarah gestured back toward the shack. "But he owned it. You hid from it." She turned to the sheriff, an older man with a weathered face. "I'll testify. About everything. The bank, the testimony, all of it. But I want your word. He gets a fair trial." The sheriff studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You got it, miss." 3 months later, the courtroom in Helena was packed. Sarah sat in the front row wearing a dress the color of mountain sky. She'd sold her wedding dress, she wouldn't be needing it for its original purpose, and used the money to hire Ezra, a proper lawyer. The trial lasted a week. In the end, the jury found him guilty of robbery, but acquitted him of kidnapping. Sarah's testimony had been compelling. He was sentenced to 5 years, with possibility of parole. When the gavel fell, Ezra caught her eye across the courtroom. He didn't smile, he wasn't that kind of man, but something in his face softened. A question, maybe, or a promise of time yet to unfold. 5 years later. Morning light spilled across the valley in sheets of pale gold. Ezra Kane stepped off the territorial prison transport with nothing but the clothes on his back and a heart full of carefully managed hope. The mountains looked the same, ancient and indifferent and beautiful. At the edge of town, a woman waited. Sarah wore practical riding clothes now, her hair longer, her face touched by sun and wind and the kind of confidence that came from choosing your own path. Beside her stood a paint horse, saddled and ready. "Figured you might need a ride," she said when he reached her. Ezra looked at her, this woman who'd saved his life by refusing to be saved, who'd rewritten her story in blood and testimony and sheer stubborn courage. "Why?" he asked. The question covered everything. Why wait? Why come back? Why give him another chance? Sarah handed him the reins. "Because 5 years ago I came west looking for a new beginning, and I found one, just not the one I expected." She smiled, and it was sunrise breaking over mountains. Sometimes the best stories are the ones we don't plan. Ezra swung into the saddle, then reached down. Sarah took his hand and let him pull her up behind him. Together, they turned toward the high country, toward whatever came next. Not outlaws, not bride and groom, but something harder won and more honest. Just 2 people who'd found each other in the Crossfire and decided to write a different ending. The wind carried their laughter up into the pines, where the mountains kept it like a secret worth holding. Thanks for watching this cinematic journey through the untamed West. Here's a question for you. If you had to choose between a safe, planned future and an uncertain path with someone who challenged everything you thought you knew about yourself, which would you choose, and why? Drop your answer in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that'll make your heart race and your soul stir. Until next time, keep riding toward your own redemption.